Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Future is Bilingual podcast. My name is Heather, and today I'm bringing you an interview with someone I've been following on Instagram for a very long time, despite having no knowledge of the languages she's going to talk to us about. But I just find her work so inspiring. So, Anita, please tell us about yourself.
Heather, thank you for inviting me to be part of your podcast today. And mutually, I've also been following the Future is Bilingual. We just have so much in common in our
Yeah,
approach and our need to advocate for
exactly.
bilingualism. So I'm so glad that we're able to share this platform
Mm.
today. So everyone, my name is Anita Kulangara Sakaraya. You may not be able to tell where I'm from or what languages I speak just from my name,
Mhm.
unless you're a very certain part from a very small part of India. So my background is I am born and raised in America, in the United States, and my family immigrated from South India, from a state called Kerala.
Mm.
And if you know anything about India, you'll know that it is a very, very linguistically diverse, and every state speaks a different language.
Mhm.
So most Indians, especially the diaspora living abroad, will speak at least 3 to 4 languages because that's just part of life.
Mhm.
So home, I speak, obviously, we speak English with our kids. I have 2 kids in elementary school,
Mhm.
and my husband is from Mumbai.
Okay.
He speaks 7 languages. I speak about 4 to 5 languages,
Mhm.
depending on the level of fluency you ask me. But the only language we had in common was English. And
Oh.
we were determined to raise our kids to be bilingual and to appreciate our languages. So that's why we decided to focus in on Tamil. And Tamil is a language that is spoken not just in South India in the state of Tamil Nadu, but there's a large Tamilian diaspora
Mhm.
spread out through Australia, Canada, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, of course, northern Sri Lanka. And my heritage language is called Malayalam.
Mhm.
And the claim to fame for Malayalam is that it is a palindrome, which means you can read it backwards and forwards. And
Right.
it's the same spelling.
It's got such a beautiful script. I've only discovered it, since being having this podcast and being on Instagram and seeing people talk about it. And yeah, I mean, I just there's such diversity in India, of itself. But I just the languages, they look so beautiful, and I think most people maybe think India Hindi. That's maybe as far as they know. Like they speak English and they speak Hindi, but yeah, Malayalam is like very specific to Kerala, right? It's only that part of India.
Right. They also speak in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which is
Mm.
these islands off to the west of India. I believe there may be some speakers in the Maldives, but it is a very small group.
Mm-hmm.
Small group means still it's 40 million people that speak it, given that the population of India. But it
Right.
is one of the smaller languages of India. It's still so India has
So that's not
two official
small,
languages.
but I mean,
No, it's not.
I think Poland's like 44 million, and
Yeah.
Polish is like this big recognized language. Like, oh, it's a European language, it's a big recognized language. And now we're saying, oh, Malayalam is such a small Indian language. Well, no, compared to Hindi, yes, but compared to what?
Compared to other,
Yeah,
compared to
wow.
what exactly?
Wow.
So I was saying in India, it is 2 official languages, which is Hindi and English. And those are the languages of the federal, the central government. But each state, there are actually 22 official recognized languages in India. Beyond that, there's thousands of
So many.
dialects. So
Right.
even my own language of Malayalam, my heritage language, when I started out with Bhasha Kids, and I'll
Mhm.
tell you what that means in a minute, but when I started out, I didn't even realize the diversity of Malayalam itself until I started interacting with people on Instagram, and
Uh-huh.
everyone kept telling me what I was posting was wrong. This is the only word I've ever known. For example, for grandmother, the
Mhm.
word is which is what my part of Kerala that we say. But the word that most people know is mutashi, and it comes down to what part of Kerala are you from? Literally, like what district?
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, what is your religion? Because there's different words for family members depending if you are Muslim, if you are Hindu, or if you're Christian. And so my family, we are that 2% of India that's Christian. And so honestly, that's all the only word I knew. So it was, even starting Bhasha Kids and being on Instagram was such an eye opener. I've learned so much in the last 4 years. And it's so exciting. You know, I appreciate the language so much more.
So you grew up speaking, your parents always spoke Malayalam to you guys because you grew up, your whole childhood was here in the US.
We're in the US, and I will tell you, just like any children of immigrants, right? What happens, and especially when you move to a country that is monolingual, overwhelmingly monolingual, and kind of your ticket out of your country was to speak good English.
Right.
You're really afraid, and I'm putting myself in the shoes of those who immigrate. You want to give your kids the best, and you're really afraid of them having challenges. And if they don't speak English well enough, that's going to impede their progress and their success in life. And for my family, also, my mother always told me I spoke Malayalam fluently until the age of 5. And what happened to me at 5? A couple things. One, we moved away from New York, where I was born, which has a huge, not just Indian population, but such a large Malayali. That's how we call our people, Malayali population. You could go to church, you could just hang out with Malayali people all day, you know, and they would have schools. Well, then I moved to South Florida. And there were not a lot of Indians, there are not a lot of Desis and not a lot of Malayali people that we could form a church or, you know, have classes and such. And of course, at age 5, we all go to school. And so all I heard was English all day. And, you know, my parents couldn't fight that battle of, no, I don't want to speak this language anymore. Now I'm only going to speak English because, you know, all the things that kids say, right? Nobody else knows this language. Everyone's making fun of me. This is not a real language. Literally, people will say that. And then you've got this added challenge of administrators and teachers, people in figures of authority, telling immigrant parents, maybe you should just focus on one language. Maybe you should stop speaking your language at home, because it's going to be confusing. These people, you know, these authority figures hold a lot of sway for parents. You know, imagine you know, when you put your kid in kindergarten for the first time, that vulnerability that you feel, and that these people must know what they're talking about. And then on top of that, being an immigrant and like, okay, well, I have to take their word for it.
You're doing everything you can to fit in.
Exactly. You're doing everything you can to fit in.
I mean, you're talking, you know, a couple of decades ago, but this is still happening. I've seen people post that doctors are still saying you should really focus just on English. You're going to confuse that. All these myths are still perpetuated by these people, like you said, authority figures, principals, doctors, you know, you name it.
Or even the daycare workers, you know, school psychologists, teachers, people who don't have a grounding in how language is acquired, right? They don't actually have, I would say, go talk to a speech language pathologist. That's why I follow so many of them, because they literally know how language is acquired and how it is passed and how it is developed. But when you have someone who is saying things to you that it's not grounded in science, how would you know unless you took the time and effort to find that out? And then being immigrant parents, what are you doing? As I say, you're doing the immigrant hustle. You're probably working 2 jobs. You're
you don't have time.
money back.
You're not thinking about that. No. But
who has time?
I do think there's like a mixed message nowadays, because similar to you, my kids are that, you know, young school age. So my son is just in kindergarten this year. My daughter's still in a daycare because she's 4, but they're teaching Spanish, like they're counting to 10. They've got Spanish all over her classroom, you know, puerta, like door, you know, they've got like Spanish words all over. Yet there's this like double-edged sword of like, we're going to introduce Spanish. And I know many daycares promote, like they sell that as like, we also do a little Spanish integration. But then they're telling parents of, let's say, quote unquote, listeners can't see me doing these air quotes, lesser important languages, not English, Spanish, French, right? Oh, you don't speak that language to, oh, your kids don't need that dialect, your kids, right? Like you should really focus on Spanish or English. So there's this like it's very hypocritical to say like, don't speak your language, but we're going to do this little extra song in Spanish every morning. Like, wait, what? So you're not confusing them, but I'm confusing. What? You can't do one and then tell me that I can't do that at home. Like, it's just crazy.
And the truth is, if they were truly going to be bilingual, they wouldn't just sing a couple songs and count to 10.
Exactly.
They would literally conduct their business in Spanish. And so,
and there are schools that do that. You pay a lot of money, but there are those bilingual, like, full day immersion, or, and then they kind of go to like 75 and then 50, there's this whole bilingual schooling is a whole separate thing. But these schools that are just normal daycares that just throw a couple Spanish words, with pictures all over the room and say, we do some Spanish integration. I'm not like knocking, like, of course, that's a good step in the right direction, but then they need to stop saying, don't speak your home language, right? Like we need to fully embrace that languages are great. We can mix them and put them all over, introduce them, or we can't do both. We can't say yes to this one, but no to yours. So yeah, it's my little spiel.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And, you can't just pretend. You can't just placate with just a few words. And we know what it takes to raise truly bilingual kids. It is about immersion. And I would encourage anyone, I participate on a few Facebook groups where parents are always writing in about questions. And, one example I had recently was a lady wrote in about, her kid is 10 months old and she's looking at daycares. And the one daycare that she looked at said, oh, well, we're going to, you may want to start focusing on English because she's only spoke to this baby in Spanish. Well, how will she deal with us, speaking to her in English? And I was like, hey, first of all, when you want to raise young children, you have to front load that language.
Right.
Front loading means speak as much as you can when they're little, because English is going to come. You live in the US, the UK, Australia, nothing is going to stop English from coming.
Yep.
And children absolutely can learn two languages at the same time. That is the beauty of child, baby brains and child brains.
Right.
It's something that's as adults, we can't do that.
Right. And if we looked at India, if we knew anything more, and actually looked at people who live in India, like learning 4 or 5, it's just normal. That's just part of everyday life, because you need one in this situation and a different one in this situation. If people actually like zoomed in and looked at that level, they would be like, oh, wow, that's super normal. It's just that we don't do that here. And we're so far removed. We have no idea like how people live. Like that's just so normal, right? And that's not just India. That's, many countries around the world. It's the norm is to be multilingual, but somehow the world focuses on monolingual countries thinking we're the norm. And like, oh, well, Western Europe and US and Canada and Australia, that's the norm. No, that's actually the minority and not the norm. Yeah. No,
what's interesting is I've done a few talks and presentations just about that fact, and that's why it's so good to get out of the United States or out of your monolingual country and see the rest of the world. The statistics, I think the last time I checked, it's about 21% of the United States is bilingual. Oh, wow. Okay, so 79% is not. So if you are in a place overwhelmingly majority, it's odd to speak another language. Well, of course you're going to feel uncomfortable. Go to Europe, right? Go to Africa, go to India. Oh my gosh, the numbers completely change. I think last I looked at Europe, it was like 56% of Europe is multilingual, not just bilingual, more than one. The norm. And the fact is, the monolingual countries are the outliers, not the multilingual people. And so we've got to change our thinking and mindset about that. And I was going to describe schools in India. In general, what you will have is both a bilingual school. So you will take classes in Hindi, you will take classes in English, and you will take classes in your regional language. So that's 3 languages through primary school all the way up to graduation. And that is the norm. Of course, Heather, we have to bring in the question of class. This is not accessible to everyone, right? We know that the upper classes and middle class have access to more language and education than lower class. So there are certainly going to be groups of people in these multilingual countries who will only know their one language because they never leave where they are.
Maybe they couldn't go to school, they had to work from a young age. There's so many reasons, but yeah, it is definitely tied to education and class.
Yeah, I want to throw that out there as a caveat. And I focus primarily my work with Bhasha Kids is focused on the diaspora. So those who have left India and are, making their way in another country and then grappling with this question of how do I keep my kids in touch with their culture and language? And the name Bhasha Kids, Bhasha means language. And it means language in like almost every language in India. So that's how I came up with the name, and I've been told by native Hindi speakers, I'm not saying it properly. It's Bhasha, right? There's a little bit more aspiration on it.
So if listeners will probably see it in the title, but yeah, BH, right? So that's not a sound we have in English.
Yeah, exactly, Heather. This idea of inspiration, okay, that is not English. And so, of course, here I am, a middle-aged mom. I've never been told or learned how to aspirate certain words. So, of course, I can't say even my own company name right. But I think that's a beautiful learning lesson. And that's what I try to work with parents on is, and you have definitely seen this, where parents are like, oh, my kid can't say anything right. My kid won't use proper grammar, and they can't get the pronunciation. And we're always having fights about that. And really, for the kid, they'll say, my parents are always criticizing me. I can never say anything.
So they're going to stop.
Everyone gets frustrated. Everyone gets frustrated. Everyone gives up. But my point is, when you were born and raised in India, you cannot take that mindset and then attach it to your children. Your children are going through a vastly different experiences. They're going to have that hyphenated identity. They're both of Indian or South Asian descent and American, British, Australian, Canadian, right? That's a very different type of childhood than what you grew up with. First, acknowledge that. Then acknowledge they don't even know the sound they have to make. They don't know the difference between these sounds. They can't differentiate when they listen. And yes, listeners can't see me. I'm pointing to my ear. But in comprehension, there are certain sounds that are made in the South Indian languages, and they're called Dravidian-based languages. Which is called a retroflex sound. So it's where you basically take your tongue, you either hit the roof of your mouth or your tongue is moving backwards. I could not hear that sound.
Me neither. That was in a linguistics class. They used a South, I don't know exactly which language it was, but they had us listen to prove the fact that our adult ears couldn't hear sounds the difference between two sounds that we've never heard before. And to give an example with English, someone who speaks a language with very pure vowels, Spanish, Japanese, where there's just that a, e, o, u, they can't hear the difference between like I and e, because those are very slight. If you think about in English, like heat or hit can be hard for non-English speakers to hear, or like, the R and the L, very classic, like Korean and Japanese have a hard time hearing, like lit versus writ. Or making that. So same thing. And I struggle with Arabic. There's 3 H's and I literally can't hear the difference between 2 of them. And I'll again, listeners can't see me like drawing the letter, but I'll like ask the Arabic, teachers or people I speak with. I'm like, is it this H or is it this H? Because like, I can't hear it and I can't make it. So if someone's just talking and I'm not seeing it written, I'm like, which one is it? Because it'll change the whole word, right? So same with that retroflex. Yeah, and they literally, I remember them using this like, what was it like? I don't know. It's very far back R sound.
Yes, there are in Hindi there are four T's.
Oh God.
In Malayalam there's three L's. In Tamil there's three R's. There's three N's. And my cousin called me once and said, look, Anita, my daughter, she understands Malayalam, but she doesn't understand when I say, these two words. They differ literally by one letter, right? So it's harike and kalike, and one is to eat and one is to play. I'm like, wow, she really must not know what you're saying there. When you say go play, she's like, okay, I'm gonna
go eat,
but
go play.
She didn't understand why her daughter couldn't get it. And so I made her a set of flashcards where I just said, look, here are the images, and now we're going to write the word in Malayalam. And the only way to go back and understand the difference is exactly what you did, Heather, with Arabic, is show me the H. Well, I said, let me show you the letter.
Yeah.
Which one it is. And so a lot of people too, when you have languages that have different scripts, they are like, oh, I don't want to learn literacy. I just want my kid to be conversant. I don't want them to, typically when you start a language class, a South Asian language class, they start with vowels. E, ooh. And they're like, this is useless. Nobody wants to learn. I literally just need to conjugate verbs and tell my mom I'm hungry.
Right.
But I tell people, okay, I get it. We don't want to start with literacy first, but we also cannot abandon literacy
altogether.
Because the beauty, we can. Because the beauty of these South Asian languages is they're entirely phonetic. That's why they say, oh, this, Tamil must have 240 letters. But that's because in English, we have C and H. We put them together, we get cha. Well, in Tamil, you will have a C, you will have an H, and you'll have a different letter for cha.
Because it is a separate sound.
Yes,
and we don't think of that in English, but if you study, like I did a minor in linguistics, and like the two words you gave with play and eat, those are minimal pairs. Just like I said, heat and hit, those are also what we call minimal pairs. They differ by one letter, or what? Sorry, I should say one sound. And so language, has different. The different scripts have maybe one letter will show a different sound, whereas in English we have these like, what do we call them, diachronic or something, like with the two letters like CH, SH, right? That really only makes one sound, but we write it with two letters. So it's English, first of all, is the most confusing. The letters mean nothing because in one word they're pronounced this way, in another word they're pronounced this way. I mean, if we really want to get into it, English doesn't make it.
I'm giving you a high five. I'm giving you a double 10 here. Okay, I'd say this is patta. Give me 10 because I realized, as I started this journey with Bhasha Kids, and what we do with Bhasha Kids is I create bilingual materials in South Asian languages, learning materials for children, but I also curate learning materials. So I try to find what are the best resources out there, and I started this journey in really 2018. I didn't launch a website or anything until right before the pandemic. Great timing. But actually it wasn't that bad because there are so many people are stuck at home with their kids.
Online, looking for stuff.
But I delve deeper into my methodology of how I'm writing everything in English. I'm saying you can learn South Asian languages through English. I started to learn, wow, English is really hard to learn.
Which is crazy. Yeah, I didn't appreciate it. I only started appreciating it when I was teaching it.
Exactly. And until you delve into, you see your kids do phonics and stuff. But when you understand how to learn different languages, and then you look back at English, I just want to say hats off to everyone who's learned English as a second language, because you've done something heroic. It makes no sense. It has rules and then it breaks all the rules.
It breaks them all. And sometimes I'll think of the sentences we're saying and I'm like, it's just one word, in Spanish, for example, like, did you see? You could just say that with one viste. And like, I'm so sorry, this is so complicated with the did you see? And like, but you would say, I saw. So like, it doesn't even help you to know how to answer because like the question is using did see, then you're saying saw. I'm like, well, English is so hard. Yeah.
Because
You
what I
really,
see for South Asian languages, the way to approach it is, don't take that traditional approach. Don't take the curriculum from India or Pakistan or Sri Lanka or Nepal, wherever you're coming from. Don't take that and drop it here, because any teacher will tell you, you've got to meet kids where they are and you've got to make it relevant to them.
100%.
So even the sentences they use, they won't make sense. But you can, at home, put in an extra effort. You're going to have to put in extra effort. You can't just throw them in a class for an hour a week and expect them to be bilingual.
Expect miracles.
Language,
Yeah.
right? It's a living. We have to use it every day.
Yeah.
So I'd say focus on what's different about this language in English, so that the kids, that's what are those pain points? Identify the pain points and hone in on them,
Yeah.
right? Don't focus so much on literacy and spelling, and focus more on vocabulary. I really believe in the comprehensible input methodology. Start with those 7 verbs and build a confidence to speak.
Yeah.
And
Little
that
by
this is a lifetime goal. I do a couple parenting webinars here and there. And when parents sign up, they dial in, I always ask this question about how long do you think it takes to become fluent in a language? Everyone underestimates this. Everyone thinks it's like 2 to 5 years. And I'm like, okay, put it in terms of, being a child, how many hours would they have to put in? I'm like, it will really take like 10 to 12 years. You can look up the research.
right.
And you can look at, I go to, because I'm here just outside of DC, and I used to work with the State Department. They have an intensive foreign language school, the Foreign Service Institute.
Yep.
When you're about to be posted overseas, you take 4 to 5 months of classes. You do nothing but live and breathe that language, that you can get to at least an A2 level of that language to be proficient. But they rate the languages based on difficulty.
I've
Right.
seen these. Yep. I've
And
seen these categories and levels.
right. I mean, I think Czechoslovakian is the hardest language to learn, is what I've heard and what I've seen in their data. But our languages, South Asian languages, fall about like a level 3, and they will take thousands of hours to get to that A2 level. And Heather, I know your basis is in European languages. Can you explain to people what is
But the
A2 and
A2.
A1?
Yeah. So if you're not familiar with that, the European, I forget what they call it, but the references. So A1 and A2 are the beginner levels. And so, there's certain things you can do. A1, you're like introducing yourself, talking about yourself. A2, you can talk a little bit more, maybe present tense. I think you start maybe getting into like close future, like I'm going to eat, and then maybe a little bit of past. And then that B1, B2 is the next intermediate. I don't know why they do A1, A2, B1, B2, and then C1, C2. But yeah, B1, B2 is where a lot of people get stuck, because it's kind of easy to pass and kind of breeze through the beginning stuff. And you're like, oh, great, I introduced myself. I'm this, many years old. And then you get to that more intermediate phase, and a lot of people plateau. Like it's really hard to get, B1 and then move on to B2, which is much more advanced language. And C1 is like you're very proficient, right? Like you are, I would say even some native speakers maybe in the C1 level. Like it's not that everybody who's native is a C2. C2 is like superior. Like you are eloquent when you speak. You have like very, you can write really eloquently. You have a very, very high vocabulary. It's just not even, when you think, like I like to think about it, that not all natives are C2. A lot of natives could be like C1, depending on your education, B2, C1. So that C2, it's not that like that's the goal that you're going to get there per se, because it's a very high level. And I've seen it as a triangle. I kept making hand motions that nobody else can see, but there's this big triangle where it's an upside down triangle. So the bottom of the triangle is like the smallest point. And so this is the one we use when we show our students, because when you're first starting, you can talk about very little, right? Me in Arabic, I can say like very little. I can understand very little. And as you move up the triangle, it's a cone. You can talk about more things. Your abilities get much broader, but it's it takes so much more language, meaning so much more exposure, so much more time to broaden up that cone and fill up all of that spot where you don't just talk about yourself in present tense. You can talk about past tense and what would happen if this had happened. You know, like that's a very high level of language. You have to be able to know to do these hypotheticals and what would happen if I did this. So yeah, I like to think of this huge cone where you're just able to talk about so many more topics as you get higher and higher. But yeah, C2, it's a nice goal, but man, you can do a lot with B1, B2. C1's a great
goal. You can do a lot with A2.
Even A2.
I mean, literally, yeah, I mean, people don't count yourself out. You know, it's what do you need to communicate with others, and who are you communicating with? What do you need to enjoy that language, enjoy that culture, to understand the music? I see the C2 level as, you know, that completely balanced bilingual, but not only can you read novels in that language, you can write a novel in that language.
Yeah, it's very high level.
So that's interesting. I loved your description of that graphic of this inverted triangle.
That's not from me. I think that's ACTFL, the American Council of Teachers of Foreign Languages. I believe they created this cone. And I've within my company, we talk about the research and how many hours. So we teach, and again, it depends where you're starting from. If you're an Arabic learner learning a different language, it's completely different than being an English speaker learning another language. So again, all this research is if you're an English speaker trying to learn Spanish, right? So the languages we teach, Spanish, French, Italian, they're all like just one level up. You know, they're very close. There's cognates, there's the same alphabet, there's all these things that make it easier. And yet, even with those languages that, you know, are the easiest ones to learn, it still takes about 750 hours to get proficient. So proficient being like A2, B1, which can seem a little daunting and can seem a little like, oh, you know, should we even tell people that? Are they going to even want to embark on this journey, or is it going to scare them? Because our courses maybe give you 50 hours towards that. Or maybe, you know, if you do a lot more outside of your, you know, the coursework that we're giving you, maybe 75 or something like that for 8 or 12-week course. But like, that's a lot, right? If we're saying 750 and in 3 months, you're only getting 50 hours, you have to do, right? And that's where the math comes in, where, yeah, it's not just 2 years, it's not just 3 years. But I think there's also this misconception because people look at a child, oh, well, my child was speaking, you know, 2 years old, 3 years old, they're pretty much fluent by 5, right? Native children who've been listening to it constantly 24 hours a day for their entire lives. That's one thing. You as an adult spending an hour a week, of course, you're not going to do it in 2 years, right? I think we're conflating those issues. We're thinking, oh, well, if they do it in 2 years, I should do it in 2 years or 1 year. Okay, but you got to put in a lot of hours. That's the reality. Like, it's not going to happen in 6 months, like YouTube says.
I 100% agree with you, Heather. I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about how language is acquired, and that, as you said, adults conflating research that's been applied to children, or just looking at
children.
Well, why can't I do what they do? I mean, our brains are literally different. And so I encourage people to know the facts and look at the neuroscience behind language learning. I personally feel a lot better and reassured. And there's so much guilt associated with language learning, and especially if it's a heritage language.
Yes.
And that's my mottos or my tag phrases. The first thing I lead with is always, you know, heritage languages are not just academic. You know, they are absolutely psychological, and they are rooted in shame and longing. And if we don't talk about the emotional aspect of learning your heritage language, and I define a heritage language as the language I inherit from my family, I differentiate that from mother tongue, because I feel mother tongue confers an amount of fluency or some level of fluency. Like, I should know this.
Right.
My mother tongue is both English and Malayalam. Right? How do I decide? But I know my heritage language, and when you look at linguistic studies and, socio cultural linguistics. The other aspect of heritage language is not only is it something that is handed down to you, but it's something that is crowded out over time by the dominant or majority language of the environment you're in.
Right.
So it actually connotes loss.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when so many children and families grapple with, if I lose this language, does that mean I'm still this person? It's so tied to your identity.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
you sent me these questions ahead of time. And, one of the questions, what are the languages that I learned when I was growing up? Well, I went full bore into Spanish, and I never felt bad about Spanish. It was, it was a challenge. It was an academic exercise. And then I said, okay, now I'm going to learn French. And I went to one of these international baccalaureate high school programs where you're literally taking classes in French. I had to pass several college exams for French. And I was reading and writing in French, and I loved it. I was almost dreaming in French, at that point. And even today, when people play a little trick with you, like, what's the word for this? Do you know the first word that comes to mind is French for me before Malayalam or Spanish or English? I suddenly, and I start totally mixing them up. I'll tell my daughter I want to say, because we're also working on Spanish at home, and like, il pleut. I'm like, oh, I want to say it's raining in Spanish.
Wrong language.
It's funny how our brains
it's so
tricks
funny
on us, but
yeah. And that's the fun of being multilingual. And I think you just touched on such an important topic. And I've had at least a couple heritage, I can think of a couple guests that talked about, having a heritage language. And you're so right that it implies not growing up in the country where that's the dominant language, right? And which mother tongue doesn't. It doesn't have that connotation, right? So first of all, a mother tongue, I mean, it carries with it the sense that, yes, you master that one the best. But yeah, the heritage language completely has that sense of there's loss there. You didn't grow up where that is the dominant language, right? So it does kind of fit better with what you want to express, that maybe this isn't my dominant language, but this is something I've inherited. This is part of who I am. And I just think that we don't talk about it enough. There's so much baggage and shame and judgment. Whereas, if I don't speak French or Spanish well, okay, I learned them in high school or whatever. And, I took, so many people, I took 2 years of that and I don't remember a word. That's a very common thing. Being a language teacher, people always say to me, oh yeah, I did that in high school, or it's been ages. I can't say anything but gracias. And there's no shame, right? There's nothing tying them to that language. So whatever, just like me, I took chemistry and I don't remember any formulas. Okay. Because there's no connection with chemistry being part of who I am. But with a heritage language, it's a whole different story. And I feel like as someone who doesn't have a heritage language, you can't understand what the person is feeling, what they're going through, and, why they don't want to talk about it per se. Because there is so much shame if you haven't maintained it, or even if you have maintained it, it's never going to be high enough, right? Like you want to be that perfect unicorn, C2, perfect bilingual. So if you're not, which nobody is, there's going to be some shame. Or like you said, maybe your pronunciation isn't perfect, or you go back home and they recognize you as a foreigner, and you're here and you're recognized as a foreigner. So there's that whole dilemma of never fitting in. I say this as if I know. I don't know.
But because my other tagline, it's like I've pinned them both to the top of my Instagram. It's that one quote about heritage language, and the other one is, when you're Indian American, you're simultaneously both and neither, right? So here in America, I'm not American enough, and here when I go to India, I'm not Indian enough. Right. And so you have to straddle both worlds, and you've got to find a way to make peace and sense of that. And you can't divorce language from that, because it's in everything. It's in how we pronounce the foods that we eat, our favorite dishes, the names of our relatives. And there are, I think if you grow up in cities like New York or Houston or Chicago or the Bay Area, you've got a much better chance of holding on to that language. There's so many more resources
The
around you.
community aspect is cradling it a little bit more. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. If you grow up in Miami like I did, or Oklahoma, or other places, it's so
Some
much
small.
harder. But
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people who buy my products, it's interesting, they're actually, in their 20s or 30s, they're like, I actually want to use this to help myself.
Yeah,
And the
I was
thing
gonna.
about the heritage language journey, it's never ending.
Mm-hmm.
You never not there. There doesn't come a point in time where you want to stop learning or you stop longing for it. I really think everyone, unless you've completely diverse yourself from the culture, you're always going to have a piece of your heart that's kind of longing or not fulfilled. And so for now, I'm learning, and this is the difference between 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. The amount of resources and access we have, it's changed dramatically. And so there's YouTube, there's Instagram, there's italki, Preplay, Duolingo and Rosetta Stone. They've only ever focused on Hindi, right? Which find it to be a detriment to all the diversity, all the linguistic diversity in India. Right. It's really hard to find materials in other languages, which is what spurred me to create the materials that I have. I have adults coming to me saying, I'm using this to just teach myself. I'm so happy.
Yeah.
I always hear, I'm so happy that I was able to say a sentence, or I am using this to teach my non-native speaking spouse. I've got a lot of, I call them blended families, mixed families, coming, who are like, oh, my partner, everything they've tried hasn't worked, but somehow your methodology is clicking for them. That's and great. Just the difference is, I approach it as, you are not a native speaker, so I'm not going to teach you the way they teach native speakers, right? And so, but happiness and that joy, you can't divorce yourself from it. Oh my gosh, I started taking an actual class last year. There's a company called Language Curry. They're based in Delhi, but they focus on all regional languages, and they're very professional. They have all kinds of tutors. They have one-on-one classes. They have group classes, and they have an app that goes with it so that you can study. I took a class, and there was just two other people there, and our pronunciation, you're like, yeah, this guy's in Philadelphia. Here I am in DC. And we're laughing, but we shared so much in common, like, oh my gosh, he's like, my mom is going to make fun of me. She's going to say, this is not the way it's said, or, but joy that we had in like achieving these milestones of like, oh my God, I said my first sentence. Oh my gosh.
It's huge.
I understood something that I couldn't understand. I even learned, apparently, I remembered, or I had words in my head. I'd been pronouncing them incorrectly my entire life.
Oh no.
I can't imagine all the aunties and uncles are like, we're just not going to say anything to her. But, my teacher corrected me gently, explained. I was like, thank you for taking the time. And I don't know what I don't know.
Right.
And I don't know.
And that happens in that happened to me learning Polish, that, my ex didn't want to correct me. So for 6 months, I was using the wrong grammar. And like, I don't even know how it finally, somebody corrected it. And I was like, what? It's like almost, it's fossilized at that point. Like I've been saying it, only 6 months compared to yours, not even that long. But it was like, once you've said something so many times, it's hard to change. Now I have to really think about it. And then I question, wait, was it this one or this one? Like even to this day, 15 years later, I'm like, wait a minute, because they're very like similar endings. And I'm like, wait, which one was it? It happens.
Well, you know what? Wrong practice makes a bad play. Like when my kids play piano, and I'm like, bad practice equals a bad piano player. If you're literally practicing the wrong notes and you're continually practicing the wrong form or the wrong dynamics, how do you untrain yourself? How do you unlearn those? It's harder. And it all comes back down to simple muscle memory, right? So even those, we were talking about the sounds that we can hear, the sounds we can't make. That is why starting so young, starting with babies and children, makes such a difference, because if they can learn those different sounds and those muscle movements, they are not going to unlearn them.
Right. And so, not to not to discourage, but it's up to 6 months is what the research says. Babies can hear every single sound of all the world's languages, and like they'll pay attention to it, but it's only up to 6 months. After 6 months, they do start focusing on the languages that they're hearing. So a bilingual child, right, is going to focus on the two. If it's a child in a multilingual situation, they'll focus on 4 or 5, however many it is, but they eventually need to start tuning other ones out, because if that sounds not important for them, they need to make room to just focus on. So, I mean, it is 6 months is what the research says, unless the research has changed since my studies, but it's very early, but you can still train your ear, right? Like I know it's not easy, but it's definitely doable. And like you were mentioning, it has to start with the ear. You have to hear the 2 different R's or the 3 different L's if you want to make it. You can't make it if you don't even hear it, because how is your mouth gonna form where it needs to go if it doesn't even hear the difference? So it's not impossible, but yes, I think we don't put enough emphasis on, we need teachers or an instructor or a one-on-one tutor. We need some guidance. Like, I think it's very popular right now to like learn languages by yourself, and I'm all for that. I like to do it too. I'm cheap and I study Italian on my own, but for fun. If it's a language you're trying to learn for a partner or for your family, if there's some like stronger connection, I do think it's so worth it to have that instructor, somebody that's gonna correct you. It's not family where they don't want to make you feel bad. So like they'll tell you, hey, say this differently. So it's invaluable.
I always tell people, they're like, oh yeah, why should I pay for classes? Why should I invest in resources? And I'll just teach my kids myself. I'm like, unless you are a teacher, you cannot teach your kids. And even teachers don't want to teach their own kids.
I was going to say that. Or kids don't want to learn from their parents. Even if I could teach my kids, they don't want to listen to me per se, because they're listening to me for every other aspect of their lives. So
absolutely. This puts you guys like in a weird power play. We put our kids in soccer, we put our kids in piano, we get them reading tutors. Why would you not invest the same resources? Just because you are a native speaker doesn't mean you have the ability to teach. Teaching itself is a skill. And then just as, Heather, you just said it, kids don't want to learn from their parents, right?
Not so the same.
I think don't damage the relationship with your child by making language a place of contention. Outsource it, and then put yourself in the place of being a support.
Exactly, because it's not that you can't speak to them. Of course, support all that they're doing in their language class, and be the support person. Whether it's there's so many ways to support, whether you're the native, you're the non-native, whether you speak the language or don't, you can support it in so many ways. But yeah, if you're making it this forced thing, one of my recent guests was saying, it can't be this power struggle and this forced, you have to do this, you're obligated to do this. That's just going to destroy the relationship. So
exactly. So please invest in tutors and other resources, and put yourself either in, I am supporting your language journey, or I'm studying with you, we're on this language journey. And when kids see you as, oh wait, you're a fellow classmate, well, this is interesting, right? It'll be fun.
Yeah, that can be fun. And they can be the one showing you, maybe even purposely make a mistake and have them correct you, and they'll feel good. Like, oh, I knew this thing that mommy, she didn't know this. And yeah, there's so many ways that you could make it fun. And one of my guests talked about that. There needs to be 80% fun, 20% like learning. So he's a teacher and he's trying to teach his kids Korean and Japanese. They've got these languages that have different scripts plus French and English. They've got lots of languages in their family, but and he's very focused, Yoshito, if people know him, he's very focused on the literacy, being literate in your languages, because he
multilingual dad.
Yeah. And he was not really literate with Japanese, and it was kind of made things harder for him. So he wants his children to speak their parents speak Korean, and he's very focused on that. But yeah, it has to be 80% fun. You can't make it a job. You can't make it a second thing that they have to do when they're already tired after school, right? It needs to be fun. That's his whole there can be a little bit of learning happening. Of course, you want to help them, especially with languages that have a different script. There's a whole nother alphabet that they need to learn. And, it's an added challenge, but there's ways to make it fun. So I just think that 80-20 balance is so important to keep in mind.
Oh, it's, for parents, I think one of the things that we highlighted here is when you are not the one fully responsible for teaching or developing that heritage language, this huge weight comes off your shoulder. So that's one mindset change. And the next mindset change is, especially say, I don't want to stereotype, but part of our South Asian culture is there's a certain way to study. Drill, 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 memorize, memorize, memorize. You guys got to change your mindset on that too. And my background is I'm a corporate trainer. And so I dealt with a lot of adult learning theory. It is not any different in a corporate classroom when we are, teaching you what you need, your skills for the job. As soon as you gamify things, as soon as you bring in a little bit of competition, something silly, the mood changes. Everyone's excited to learn. Everyone's glad to be there. So it's not, I always say kids learn through play, but everyone learns through play.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
There is a place for memorization and some drills. There is a place that it is still hard work, but it doesn't have to be boring.
I just wanted to say that you mentioned earlier that there was, like, you were talking about identity, being a heritage speaker, and how, you're Indian when you're in America, but you're American when you're in India. You're never like fully one or the other. There was a famous Indian actor, I believe, who said, I'm not neither nor. I'm like, what did he say? It was like, and, like, I'm this and this. There was like this big thing that was maybe like 2 years ago on Instagram. I'd have to re-look for it, but he was all about saying, like, it's not I think he was like Indian British, and he was like, I don't need to choose which one. Like, I don't have to be half of one. I think it was not half, but like I'm completely this and I'm completely this. Like, it's not. I can't. I'll have to look it up. But I didn't know if you knew that guy and that quote that he said.
Not off the top of my head, but
yeah, I'll have to look.
I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah, he's like a famous actor, and I was like, oh, I love that message, and I reposted it to my story. Like, I do so many things that I like this is interesting, but now it was so long ago that I don't remember exactly. He might have had like a short film where it was like, I'm not neither this nor that, or it's something like not half this, not half that. I'm this and that. Like, I'm British and I'm Indian. I don't have to choose.
Right.
So that was kind of interesting.
You don't have to choose. Honestly, I think our identities are such a blend of many different things. And there's no such thing as like 50-50. It's like when you're a mother and you have 2 kids, you don't have half a heart for each. You love them both. That whole quote about my heart grows, for
exactly. It expands.
So it really is, coming to terms with what it means to you and acknowledging your whole self. And that, there's a lot of stuff coming out on Instagram where we have people talking about mixed race. And it's not that I'm 50% white and 50% African American. I'm both.
Exactly.
Right. And I can't turn one side off and turn the other side on, like a flip of a switch. So language plays a big part of that identity. It goes hand in hand with not just like your skin color and your ethnicity, even, how we intellectually identify as a teacher. I identify as a parent. Like, all of these things build up who is Anita. And you can't just turn one off at a flip of a switch.
You don't have to choose. Well, now I'm being a mother. I'm not a teacher, and I'm not a wife, and I'm not like, you can be all the things at the same time.
And you bring all those things to every experience that you have. Earlier you were talking about that diagram of the cone, and I had created something similar to that, but it's more of a pyramid. But my perspective was, it wasn't about information and the ability to speak. It was really about the numbers of bilinguals and balanced bilinguals, and how do you become a balanced bilingual? And what I presented to parents is, that idea, this ideal you have on the pedestal is this C2 balanced bilingual. It is the very tip of the pyramid. Not many people achieve that. Exactly. The rest of us are down here at that first, the first floor of the pyramid, which is all of us A1s. I'm like, you want to get to that A2, B1, B2 level, right? That's kind of the middle of the pyramid, but understand it gets harder and harder, and the number of people who have that level of fluency is less and less.
And it's not going to happen if the parents aren't supporting. Like, I'm sorry to say it, right? Like, this is a parenting podcast about raising bilingual kids, but like, you cannot expect signing your kids up for Saturday school or marrying somebody that speaks, X language, Russian. Like, they're not just going to automatically be Russian speakers because you married someone who speaks that language. Like, there is so much work that goes behind it. So you can't just, I'm Malayalam, so my kids are going to grow up and be bilingual. No, it's that there's so much work that's going to happen. And they may.
That's not in our DNA. It's not an inherited trait.
Exactly.
Like your color, your hair. It literally is something we all have to work on.
It's a skill, and it's learnable. That's why people who aren't of that heritage can still learn it, right? But yeah, it's going to take time, effort, possibly money, right? If you're going to invest, well, actually 100% it's going to take money, because it's almost impossible to not spend money on, let's say, a tutor or books or streaming services or something that's going to give them a trip. I can just think everything that's going to help your kid is going to come with some cost, because raising kids costs money, first of all.
Yeah. But, and then we're talking about languages that are not heavily resourced. You'll have to spend even more money.
Exactly.
I can tell you what we do in our house. We every week we watch movies, we listen to music. We have, our standard phrases around the home that we only say in Tamil. And they always hear their dad on the phone talking multiple languages to different people, so they're hearing it. We also changed our smart devices, the voice of our smart devices, to have an Indian English accent.
Nice.
So that, we're like, Alexa, do this. Anita, today, this is your blah, 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 and just the beautiful pronunciation. So that's another way for us to hear that those sounds again, and that language, and normalize that voice and normalize Indian English, because we can't.
That's great.
We are going to go this summer for a month. And of course, what happens when you go overseas, everyone wants to speak English with you. It's their opportunity to practice English.
Of course, right.
And we are actually enrolling our kids in a class for the very first time. And my kids are much older. My daughter just turned 9 and my son is 11. We held off on formal classes for them for a long time. And part of the reason was, one, it was far away from us. There are actually 3 Tamil schools in the Northern Virginia area.
Wow.
But they're about an hour drive that would take most of our day. But I will add that my son has learning disabilities. And I did not think that those classrooms were inclusive for people like him. And I didn't want him to hate the language, because if you imprint that at a young age, oh my God, I hate this language, the teacher was the worst, I didn't learn anything, I struggle so much, they're going to think I can't learn.
Right. It's going to be so much harder to break that once that's been
implemented them a lot. And that was why I actually started Bhasha Kids, because I just wanted to make materials to help him learn and keep him conversant and keep exposing them. And one of your questions was the proudest bilingual moment. It actually happened just on Friday.
Oh wow!
Where
fresh off the press
with this teacher, we were doing a demo class, and I told them ahead of time, they're not completely beginners. They're not coming from a blank slate. They have stuff. Oh my gosh, they were able to answer every question she asked. She's like, I'm going to teach you the numbers. Hold on, we're going to count for you, right? Like, she couldn't teach them anything in that first class because they already knew so much. And then she stopped and she was like, listen to how you say that word. You don't sound like an American saying that. You sound like a Tamilian saying that. I was behind the computer, but I was like jumping up and down. Like,
oh, that's
and of course, then, hey, it was me. I don't think.
Oh my gosh! You're like, where's my credit? Hello.
Yeah, but it was so great that just, you need a win.
Right.
You put in all this effort, you need a win. And for this lady who is sitting in Chennai, the capital of Tamil Nadu, and
Mhm.
saying, you have a Tamilian accent,
Oh,
and I never encounter students like this, I was so gratified
that's
that,
amazing.
I was like, oh, everything worked. Like, it
Yeah.
was not all for naught. And then just going back to that proud parenting moment, another
Mm.
one was that hard retroflex sound. So when you spell Tamil, you always see it as Tamil.
Hmm.
It's not an like la la la, it's retroflex L. So you will sometimes see it as Tamizh.
Oh,
ZH.
well,
Not Tamiz, it's Tamil. And it's where you take your tongue back from your teeth back up
well,
to your throat without touching the roof of your mouth.
almost.
And my daughter is the one who taught me to say it,
That's a,
because I was working with her, I was presenting her, logically, this is how it works. It sounds like story or American, like the R in American, how your tongue goes back a little bit.
mm,
So she kept doing it, and she's like, oh, here's the sound. She said it and made such a pure sound. I swear, Heather, it was the first time I ever heard it. I was
wow.
like, oh, that's what it is. And I'm
There it
like,
is.
oh.
Ding.
So literally, guys, my daughter taught me
Oh,
a sound in Tamil. And so you can reinforce each other and be
mm,
open to that. Be
yeah,
open
that's
to your
beautiful.
kids working with you and teaching you, um, and take that weight off your shoulders. Remember and remind your kids that language is a lifetime journey.
Hmm.
It's not something that you're going to check off the box and I'm done, you
Never.
know,
It's so true.
but it,
I still learn words in English when I'm reading a novel. I'm like, oh, that's a weird word. What is that? It's just not a word I use in my everyday language, which is that point of that C2, right? Is that really high advanced vocabulary that you don't need to live. Nobody needs these high advanced words, but they're there. They exist. And, you know, very well educated, raised and always living in America for like 3 years in France. But yeah, I still am learning English. So it's never ending. And of course, all the other languages and things. But so I just have a quick question because you said you and your husband didn't share any language but English. So have you learned Tamil, or like it wasn't one of your original 4 or 5?
it's a great question. And this is a common misconception. Everyone's like, oh, if you know Malayalam, you can learn Tamil. If you know Tamil, you can learn Malayalam. And it's like they're similar, but it's the difference. I like to say it's like Spanish and Portuguese. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of similarity. There's
Okay.
significant differences as well.
Mm.
So when we decided, okay, we're going to focus on Tamil for the kids and not Malayalam, being that my husband was the native speaker, I just assumed, well, hey, it's not that different. I'll get it. Big
Mm.
deal. And then I was like, wait, what are you saying? And I would take a Sharpie, I would have their board books, and I would write the Tamil in English,
Uh-huh.
right? The transliteration in their book so I could read along with them. And I was like, wow, that is not the word I use.
Right.
And there are certain syllables like ba and pa are switched. So ba in Tamil is pa in Malayalam, and
Oh
guys, don't
no.
come after me. I said it wrong. But the idea is that yes, that there are syllables that are absolutely switched. So, for example, the word for red in Tamil is savapa, and the word for red in Malayalam is chuvapa. So,
Right. So it's
it's
similar, but it's not a given. And actually, I think it's so
it's
interesting. I saw a post recently about the comprehensibility. So like how much Spanish can a Portuguese person understand, or a French person, with the Romance languages. And it was higher for Portuguese speakers can understand like 70, I think it was like 78% of Spanish, but a Spanish speaker can't understand as much Portuguese. Like it doesn't go both ways. And I've seen this with Slavic languages as well. They compare how much, Polish can a Ukrainian understand versus a Ukrainian understanding Polish. And it's not equal. It's not that one is 45 and the other one's 45. It's usually one is like 50, 60, and the other's only like 20. So it's really interesting how it can go not the same way. Like maybe a Tamil speaker understands more Malayalam versus the Malayalam Tamil? I don't know.
Actually, that is exactly it. I think that so Tamil is one of the world's oldest living languages. It's 5,000 years old, and Malayalam, when you look at the, is it the etymology of the right word, but the going back into history and looking at where did
Yeah,
Malayalam come from, it's right off from Tamil, and it was called Old Tamil. So it definitely they had similar origins. It branched off and it became a little bit more Sanskritized. And that's one of the biggest differences between these, what I call the Dravidian languages. There's like the 4 languages in South India. Why people from North India can't understand them at all, they struggle, it's because the North Indian languages are derived from Sanskrit. And the South Indian languages are not wholly derived from Sanskrit. They're also derived from Pali. When you go back to those early roots. And so Malayalam has a bit more Sanskrit to it. I will say, at home, so we're teaching Tamil. I'll always give Malayalam for comparison, but I'm not holding on to it as the language they need to speak. But I also work with them with Spanish at home. So we have books in Spanish, and when we walk to school, I'm either talking to them in Tamil or in Spanish. Like you take those little moments that you can get.
Right.
And then I made little flashcards for my kids, and we put it up all around the house. Your language learning technique, right?
Yep.
And
The visual.
the word. Yes. So like, here's the door, puerta, right? As you said. Well, guess what is the word for table in Spanish and Tamil and Malayalam? It's all mesa, mesh, mesha.
Wow.
They are all the same.
Oh, that's so interesting.
And that's because all the way back in history, it comes from that Proto-Indo-European, right? That we all came from the same base.
Wow.
At some point, all of our languages totally change and develop, but you can go back and find exactly the same word. And it's not because that word was brought from the Portuguese or, whatever it is. It's like, wow, that word is actually the same.
Even farther back than that. Yeah. Wow. That's so cool. I had no idea there was a connection between these languages. So that's really cool to hear. Okay. Can you teach us either a word or an expression in, well, I guess Tamil or Malayalam, your choice?
Yeah. And you were asking, I'm learning with the kids. So, we sit down, they think mommy is a straight A student. Because I'm always like, no, this is the way we need to study, guys. So I am learning, and it's hard. It's so hard for me because even the conjugation is different.
Right.
In Malayalam, everything you end with ana, and it's subject, object, verb. And we don't really have to conjugate a lot of sentences in Malayalam. It's like, it's not yo soy tú eres. It's, ana. It's the same. And I can't
like
get
English. Like I eat.
Yeah, I am.
Eat, we eat, they eat. Eat.
Yes. I'll eat.
Yeah.
So, Tamil, you do conjugate every verb. And I'm like, oh, that's why it's hard for me. But going back to what can I teach? I'm going to teach you guys 2 phrases, okay? Any South Indian, it doesn't matter what language they speak, but you are going to hear this phrase, and it can mean so many different things. It's one of those phrases that it can mean like, oh my God, or oh no, or that's awesome.
Right. The whole gamut of emotions, but there's an emotion there.
It just depends on the tone that you're using. It's not necessarily bad or good. But the very simple, it's 2 syllables. Ayo. And you'll hear this in Korean. It's a very similar word in Korean. But I dropped something in front. Ayo. I won a prize. Ayo. So ayo. It's a great exclamation that you will hear from South India. It's fun.
I like that.
And then I want to teach you, like, how do we say goodbye? And we don't necessarily say goodbye, but just like in Spanish, say hasta luego. I'm going to see you later. Pinna kanam. Pinna is then. And kanam, actually, kanna is your eyes. Pinna kanam, I will see you later.
It's like later, see. Oh, that's cool. It's kind of like nos vemos in Spanish. We will see each other.
Yeah, nos vemos is exactly.
Very cool.
Yeah. I know you and I could talk for like 5 more hours.
No, go for it. Teach us another one.
But Kandatil Sandosham. I just learned this one myself. This is Malayalam, and Pinnakanam is also Malayalam, but Kandatil Sandosham, you might have heard a word you heard that I already said. Kandatil Sandosham means in seeing you, I have happiness.
Oh,
I'm like, beautiful phrase, right?
That's a nice one.
A bit more formal, but it's a wonderful way to greet each other.
I was going to say, it's a nice way to, when you see someone for the first time again, like, oh, I'm so happy to see you.
Yeah, exactly. I'm so happy to see you. And if you know someone whose name is Santosh, now you know his name means happiness. So,
yeah.
Sandosha, seeing you, I'm happy.
Yes, that makes sense. I've seen that word. Don't know where it was, like a yoga studio or something.
Yeah,
but
probably.
that makes sense. Yeah. Well, thank you. Where can we find out more about, I'm going to mispronounce it as well, Bhasha Kids?
That's how I say it.
Okay, cool.
So Bhasha is BHASHAKIDS. We have a website, bhashakids.com, and we're very active on Instagram and we're on Facebook. And so we have bilingual materials for kids in Hindi, Tamil, and Malayalam, as well as bilingual books. I'm working with a lot of self-published authors who are coming up with new resources every day in South Asian Kid Lit, and we're trying to get them on our website, but you'll see me promoting a lot of books about language and culture. And this summer, I'm excited, it's finally happening. I am expanding my product line to include vocabulary words and animals. So we already have numbers, body parts, and colors. We're going to go to animals, but we're also expanding our languages. So we will have products in Gujarati, Marathi, Telugu. Am I forgetting? We're also going to have Kannada, Punjabi, and Bangla come out later this year as well.
That's huge.
So
oh my gosh.
I'm really excited. So these are, you can use them in the classroom. Several language schools across the US are already using them as part of their curriculum. They're great for homeschool learning. They're great for just studying on your own. The new version, our Bhasha Kids 2.0, is going to include the script at the back so that you can look at, oh, what are those sounds? Oh, this is the letter she's talking about, right? So incorporated literacy, whereas our first version did not have the script at all. But I am on to give homage to the script. And we have parent coaching and webinars. We'll have a couple webinars coming up in June for how to use cards, as well as just, what are you going to do over the summer? How do you promote language learning over the summer?
Yes.
So that is it. Again, I'm Anita, and I am the founder of Bhasha Kids, and I love language. I want everyone to not give up on their heritage languages.
Yes, that's such an important message, and it's never too late, right? We have those adults that are going back to their heritage language, and Bhasha Kids, we're all kids at heart, right? So even if you're now 40, 60, you could still enjoy these materials, or if you're dating or married to someone, it's for kids, but not only. Right? And I use kid materials with my students. I'm going to be teaching Polish soon, and we read kid books, and it's all adults, but we read through kids books because they're fun and a little bit simpler than picking up a novel and saying, we're going to read this book, right? That's not attainable.
No, if you're a beginning language learner, absolutely pick up children's books and children's bilingual books, because it 100%. Will make so much sense to you. Sentence structure is simple. And of course, the pictures are fun and the stories.
The pictures help, and they help you understand, for sure.
Textual learning is so important in learning a language. So do invest in children's books and bilingual 100%. Literature if you can.
Yes, 100%. And we will, I always say, but I'll say it again, I will include links to all of the things that Anita has mentioned so that it's easy for listeners to just go to the show notes and find everything. And when I post about it on the website and all the places on Instagram, it'll be linked up so you guys can find her easily, although she's pretty easy to find. Well, thank you, Heather. It was such a pleasure to talk with you. And yes, I mean, we could stay here and talk about languages and all the good linguistic stuff that we could do, but I have to go teach my class. So I'm gonna have to cut it out.
Me too. Grazie,
Well,
prego.
yeah, keep up all the good work.
Merci.
No, thank you. I wish actually, how do I say thank you in Malayalam or Tamil?
In Tamil, it's nandri. That's
Nandri,
that d at the top of your
Nandri,
palate, d. And in Malayalam, it's ni. It's that knee with the like your knee.
Uh-huh.
It's not the end at your dental end. It's the back of the palate end. Nani.
Nani. Mm.
You got it.
Tried.
Yeah.
It helps that I know what
Well
my
done.
palate is, and I've done the linguistic. Otherwise, if you don't know what the palate, the roof of your mouth.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, well, thank you. It was really such a pleasure. And yes, we'll be, sharing all the links and things so people can find you and just check it out. If you've never heard of these languages, go see what they look like, go check them out, because I know it was eye-opening for me to be like, whoa, we like I said, we hear of Hindi and that's about as far as we get. So India is so rich, linguistically, that there's just, even just to look and just enjoy the scripts, I find it just so beautiful and fascinating. So delve into it a little bit. Everybody's got Google, go look at it.
Everyone's welcome.
Yes,
Bienvenue.
exactly. You're all welcome to check it out. All right, well, thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Heather.